This is episode 51 of the Wildlife Photography Q&A videos. It's also episode 170 of the Wildlife Photography podcast. So moving forward, 51 through 169 is gone. We're going to pick up at 170. So it links up with the podcast. Here we go. Hey everybody, my name is Gerry, I'm from Wild Eye, and this is episode 170 of the Wildlife Photography podcast, but it is also episode 51, bear with me here, of the Wildlife Q&A video series. Now, for those of you that remember, it's almost a year ago, I finished up 50 episodes of a Wildlife Photography Q&A video series in which I basically asked you to ask me questions around wildlife photography and I would answer them in the videos. Now, I ran that for about a year and a half, and life goes on, the business gets busier, I travel more, whatever the case might be, and I started the podcast now. I think we're up to, is it a year yet? No, I don't think it's even a year yet. And after a couple of episodes, I think once I passed 100, I decided that every 10 episodes of the podcast will be a Q&A, because I think, and I've mentioned this in the past, if I look back to when I started my photographic journey, I would have loved to have the resources that we are producing today. So I was stuck in Madikwe and the Swabi Sands. I was working as a guide and even traveling. Before then, I was in the Queen Mary 2 and managing health and wellness, different career, different story. But I was trying to learn photography, and in the old days, you actually had to take this thing and you would Google. You would Google, how do I do this? How do I do that? Social media wasn't a thing. This is before Facebook. And one of the things when we started Wild Eye, the idea was let's make this whole thing friendly again. Let's try and take wildlife photography, travel photography, and just put the fun and kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? The valuable fun back into it, because it wasn't there. So that's where the videos came from, that's where the podcast came from, and I was trying to think of a way to bring the videos back, the Q&As, and I thought, you know what, easy answer. Why not just record every 10 episodes of the podcast and put it out as a video? So here it is, episode 170. Now, the questions, I asked you guys on my Instagram, my Snapchat, Twitter, whatever, to send me your questions. There's a lot. So I chose, how many did I choose? I think there's 6 here today, and I've bumped the rest to episode 180. Keep them coming though, I'm gonna keep on spilling them over. If there's too many, I might just add an episode in here in the middle somewhere and try and get those out to you as well. But for today, 6 questions, it's a little bit of everything, and I'm going to get Marlon to just read the questions for you, and I'll answer from there. Episode 170 or 51, whichever way you want to think about it, starts now.
Ryan asked, my question is, since I also use the Olympus cameras, whether I should use the electronic, which is my preference, or the mechanical shutter while we are out on game drive. I've heard it is better to use the mechanical shutter so that the drivers hear the shutter and then don't leave one sighting for possibly another too quickly.
Brian, cool. Okay, I'm going to just go quickly broad on this thing. I'm a very lazy photographer. Okay, I often say to my safari guests, do what I say, don't do what I do. This goes for photography and Lightroom. I want to make the process for me as simple as possible. I don't want to be changing my ISO every 4 minutes as the sun comes up. I will rather go and set it at 1600, as the sun comes up, drop it to 800 and stay there instead of coming down incrementally. I'm lazy because I believe the equipment can do what it needs to do. So I'm going to be brutally honest with you here, Brian. I think, this is it, I don't know, but I think I have my Olympus set to, there's an option where it can jump between the two depending on what you're shooting. So I think I have that. Other than, because again, the thing can do these amazing things. Let it do those amazing things, right? So I've set this thing to automatic so it can choose whichever. Quite honestly, I wouldn't know when to use the other one. I mean, for me, I have no choice. Again, nobody's going to stand in front of my image or look at my image on Instagram and think, holy shit, did you see this image Gerry just posted? He must have used the mechanical shutter. Nobody gives a fuck. It's just one of those things. So I don't know. I think I've got it in the auto setting. I really do not have a preference. However, what did strike me with your question was this bit that says, it's better to use the mechanical shutter so that the drivers hear the shutter and they don't leave one sighting for possibly another too quickly. If your guide leaves a sighting without inquiring to you, are you ready to leave? He should be dragged and shot in the street. They are there for you. They are not a little tour bus like a New York City bus that drives from one to the next and the next, and you decide how much time you spend. No, it's about you. So if your guide leaves, say to him, hey dude, back it up, turn the car off, calm down to a mild chill, let me finish up. It's one of those things. So for me, I could go down this road. For me, it's the mechanical or electrical shutter. I actually don't care. I think I've got mine on auto. But my thing is, if your guide tries to leave a sighting before you are done, apart from him having to question his reasons for doing what he's doing, I would look at where I'm traveling, because they are there for you. They should be helping you get the most out of every single sighting.
Irish asked, my question to you, Gerry. I know people go mad for the big five. What about the rest of the animals? I watch Safari Live every day and they concentrate more on big cats and other action, but not so much on the others.
All right, Irish 4890, I hear you. Safari Live, maybe we can make an episode on them specifically, the good, the bad, the in-between. But they have to focus on the big stuff. A lot of people out there, if I say to people, cool, I'm going to run a white-tailed mongoose and what else is random? A white-tailed mongoose and a Thompson's gazelle safari. How many inquiries do you think I'm going to get? Nobody's going to care. It's the big things. It's marketing. So the big five, Africa is unique in that it has this incredible diversity of wildlife, with the big five being the epitome. They've got this romantic, what's the word? Romantic fear almost around them, because the big five historically comes from the big five most dangerous animals to hunt on foot. That's why they're called the big five. So I mean, obviously hippos are bigger than some of them. A giraffe is taller, but they weren't dangerous to hunt back in the old days, right? So the big five have always had this charisma around them, this they're so dangerous thing, right? So I think that, and a lot of people, like I said, if I say, how many of you right now, if I showed you a picture of 5 different mongooses, can differentiate them into marsh, white-tailed, dwarf, banded, and slender? Because you don't care. Most people, Scar, that lion from the Mara, right? He has a Facebook page, yeah? What were those things called? The Mapojos, way back, has a Facebook page. Every single leopard in the Sabi Sands has a Facebook page. Often, these things are run by people sitting internationally who have never even seen them. They've just seen pictures of these things. They start this Facebook page. Heaven help you if you call them wrong. You're right? How many of you, and if you do, please email me, are following a page which someone has created for Sally, the slender mongoose that lives in Madikwe? Nobody cares, right? So obviously the big five is why people come. That said, giraffe and zebra rank pretty high as far as African species. But it's marketing. I mean, that is what people know. That is what people want to see. You want to have a lion walk right next to your car. You want to see 2 male elephants fighting. You don't want to see 2 dwarf mongoose fight in the road. Well, I do. I think it'd be pretty cool. But you know what I'm saying? It's the big stuff. If I go to, let me think about this. If I go to British Columbia, I want to see spirit bears and black bears and grizzlies. What's these things? A pine marten would be cool. I'm not going to travel there to see one. You always have the hero things. It'll always stay that way. So, big five, yes. I think let's just jump fence here. As a photographer, you should be focusing on everything. Otherwise, you're going to have a very boring portfolio. Some of my guides who started with me last year, they worked in places like Londolozi, where, and their portfolios were 100% leopard. That's nice as it is. Some of you thinking, fuck, I want that. No, you don't. It's boring. It gets very one-dimensional after a while. So if you do travel to Africa, yes, focus on the big five, but just know there's so much more.
Grace asked, I would like to someday see a crossing in the Mara, but I'm not sure how I can emotionally handle it. I know it is a circle of life, but how can you keep emotions in check to see such death and suffering? Maybe I'm just being hormonal, but I think it would be a difficult thing to watch. Hope that makes sense.
MC Grace Preston, it is a common thing, and I'm trying to recall what the podcast episode was. In the podcast, it was called Passion and Compassion. I spoke about the passion for photography of documenting the natural world versus the compassion you feel for what you're seeing. Now, if you get to a kill, a dead thing where there's lions feeding on a buffalo, and you arrive after the fact, it's pretty sterile. I mean, it stinks like hell, but there's no emotions involved there, really. However, the act of, or the sequence of predator hitting, killing, screaming, opening up, that stuff gets harsh. And like you said, the Great Migration is tough. It's, for me, when you look at a river crossing, for example, and a crocodile attacks a zebra, or a crocodile attacks a wildebeest, that to me, even if you don't like it, right? Even if you don't like it, deep down it makes sense. You can be vegan, vegetarian, you can be a tree hugger, bunny lover, whatever it is that you are. We know that a leopard has to eat meat. A lion has to eat meat. Now, I've had borderline death threats online. When I post a picture on my Instagram of a lion killing a zebra, why don't I save the animal? It's amazing. Why don't you do it? I'm like, dude, that's nature. This happens whether we are there or not. So if you can reconcile for yourself that that is nature, and whether I'm here or not, that is going to happen. That is the natural way of things, right? It's not going to make it easier, but it'll make more sense. I'll add the podcast for you in at the bottom here. I think it was in the 60s somewhere. Passion and Compassion. I've had people photographing a kill on day one in the Mara, baby buffalo, and the tears are running and they are uncontrollably crying because of the buffalo screaming, making the sounds and then dying next to the car. It's not easy, but that's nature. This is what lions do. And then the next day, as luck would have it, or not, depending on where you sit on this, we had the zebra image I posted with the lion. This happens as well. And after having a discussion the previous night, the lady was photographing and documenting that incredible natural scene. Like it or not, it's an incredible scene. The tears were running, but she was photographing. So I think it deepens your emotions and your attachment to the scene. And I do think it's, people maybe overthink it. And because of that, you start feeling too much. And I'm not dismissing the feelings of being, this is difficult, this is tough. But if we overthink these things, it's always going to be you thinking too much into the whole thing. And no, I don't think you're being hormonal. It's tough. I mean, I've had, I think in the last 5 years, or 8 years since we started this, I think there must have been about 3 or 4 times when I thought, okay, holy shit, that's rough. And I actually took the camera down from my eye while photographing, thinking, okay, wow. And it's hard. It's very hard. It's nature. It's how it works. And the question, I think the baseline question you and other people who feel the same have to ask yourself is, do you want to, for the possibility of seeing a kill and feeling sorry for the animal, is that enough for you to compromise an entire beautiful experience of a safari of 5, 6, 7, 14 days? Because maybe I see it, maybe I can't deal with it. Maybe this is too deep, but maybe you seeing that, and maybe you feeling those emotions, and maybe you crying about it is not a bad thing. I'm going to divert for a moment here. This coming Friday, I'm presenting in Cape Town, keynote speech for about conservation and photography. And the only way that you can really go deep on conservation in wildlife photography is if you care. Now, if you were in that situation and you were faced with something like that and you did not feel something, do you really care? So, I don't know. It's both sides. But what I would say to you is listen to Passion and Compassion, and it's still part of the bigger picture, and it's still warped and raw and hard as it may be, it is still a part of the natural cycle. It just is.
Brian asked, if you have time in the future, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about what works for you with respect to storing your images on external hard drives.
Brian, hey, thanks for the question, man. I actually had this very discussion with Mary, a private guided client of mine now, that I took to Madagascar and South Luangwa. So again, like I mentioned earlier on, do what I say, don't do what I do. I am very bad with my own images. I've gotten to a point, and discussion for another, I'll do this in the podcast one day, is how your own thoughts, feelings, intensity, interest, passion for your own photography changes over time, especially if you do it a lot. I asked recently, are we getting desensitized to good wildlife images? I still think yes. I'm going to do a follow-up on that in the podcast. But I'm in a place where I'm like, I'll document, save, and do it later. So I'm not big into, some people, let me tell you a story. So about 5, 6, even 7 years ago, I was running a trip, and there was a gentleman on the trip who was a little bit anal about his backup. So here's the deal. We would get back, laptop, right? Laptop, plug memory card in. He would then back up through Lightroom to 2 external hard drives, right? Because you can do destination and second copy. After that, take memory card out, duplicate everything to another 2, and he kept the memory card. So now you're sitting with 5 copies of every image on a trip. At the end of the trip, everything goes into one backpack and off he goes. I said, bro, you've got 1 point of failure. That's kind of fucked up. If you lose your backpack, everything's gone. So what I do, my system, I will go on a trip. I don't download every day because I'm working, but before I leave a destination, I make sure that I've got all my images backed up onto, I've got a dedicated external hard drive for my images. I make sure everything's on there, right? If I have space, I then copy it onto my laptop as well, but the SSDs, these aren't that big. So otherwise I'll have that and I'll have the memory cards. When I get home, I duplicate that onto another external. Done. So I travel with 2 external hard drives. The one runs my Lightroom catalog, the other one runs has my raw files. So what I also do is when I import onto the external, I create what's called smart previews in my Lightroom catalog. So theoretically then, I've got my external hard drive I'm traveling with, raw files, my memory cards as a backup while I'm traveling, and in my Lightroom catalog, I have the smart previews, which for many people in the past, I've used to extract new DNG raw files at 2000 pixels longest edge. If you don't know what the hell I just said, email me because it's pretty cool to know. When I then get home, I have a big 4 terabyte back home and I drop everything on there. That stays at home. When that gets close to full, I'll duplicate and all of those just stay. So that's me. I try to keep it as simple as possible. And maybe this is a different way, I mean, being pragmatic here, my raw file is not the end of the world. If there's, for example, a major file that I think, holy shit, this is incredible, I need to keep this forever, then I would obviously have another backup with hero shots, and if you do competitions, you can put it on there. But otherwise, that's me, hey? Backup on hard drive on computer, keep memory cards, have smart previews, get home, duplicate. Also, when my travel raw hard drive gets full, I just duplicate that and I keep this with the other one. So in time, I have doubles of everything. Keep it simple, always works.
Darren asked, I found your podcast very interesting. It made me question if the same exposure to so many good wildlife images has desensitized us to the experience of viewing wildlife. Has this also raised guest expectations of the sightings they will have, and are we still able to value our encounters with wildlife with or without our phones and cameras? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Darren, yes, 100%. I think, and it comes down to this, for those of you that haven't listened to the podcast on Are We Desensitized, go and check it out. I'll put it down here. I'll also put all these in the links on the YouTube video. People are getting desensitized to good wildlife images because we see too much of it. I'm 100%. There's an interesting post on my Instagram where people have differing opinions, but good art is art. Yes, but you still get desensitized. So before, and this is easy, you talk about phones, what do you say, without phones and cameras. Before social media, people would come on Safari and they would only see what they saw on Google. Okay, think about it. So Google would have backlogged all, and back then, not many people were into this because these things also changed the way we look at photography. And they would come on Safari and everything would be brand new. Now what happens? And this is, like it or hate it, this is the way things are working. People in the morning, they come down to the lodge. What are they doing while they're having coffee? They're checking what's happening online. If I'm at Mala Mala, I'm looking at Sangita's feed, Londolosi's feed. I know what's happening out there. I think, holy hell, Gerry, look at this. Yesterday, 2 wild dogs pulled down a baby black rhino, and then leopard came, chased the wild dogs. They took the baby rhino up the tree, and then lions came and chased it away. What are we going to see today? So expectations are skewed. It is 100%, because all the game viewing experience hasn't changed. The stuff that we see now at Londolozi, Singita, Malamala, the Mara has always been there. You just used to it because you're seeing it online all the time. So yes, people do come on safari and they do have very warped expectations of what they're going to see. If I say to someone, I'm going to go to Mana Pools, what's the first thing you think? Elephant standing on back legs. This depends on various factors. Time of year, how much rain there was, are the elephants even there? Because they might move away from the floodplain. But if you stack your odds right, you could. I've been in Mana Pools during peak season. We never saw an elephant stand up. If you go to Mala Mala, you should see leopard. And if you look at what the shit that goes down in their feed, you should see leopards doing incredible things. You might not. You might just see a leopard sleeping. So, 100%, Darren, people look at what happens in the real world on this game viewer and they compare it with what they see in the digital world. We can't change it. I think the biggest factor here is if you're a safari guest, make sure that you look at these things because you're going to look at them. You are. Don't say you're not, because you are. Look at these things, but don't let it cloud your experience of going out there. One of the questions, I think I'm going to do this as a podcast with one of the guys, is 2 people have asked this now is, what should I do to be a good safari guest? Fucking love that question. It is genius because it flips it around, and I promise you this, the people who ask that and who listen to the answer and take it to heart and really use it, they're going to have a much better experience than Tom and Sarah who looked at what they saw online and think, if I don't see this, my experience sucks. So yes, 100% people compare what they see online into the real world, and then also they are desensitized to some amazing stuff in the field. It's sad, but it's the truth.
Sharon asked, I've recently discovered your wildlife photography podcast and I'm really enjoying it. I still have many episodes to get caught up on, but I was skimming the titles and I'm not sure if the question I have has been asked yet. Apologies if they have. How valuable is it for a wildlife camera person to have a scientific background in order to study their subjects? However, going back to school for 4 more years and getting bogged down in another $75,000 of student loans isn't a reasonable option for me either. What advice would you give in this regard?
Sharon, hey, I like this question, and I have done this in the original Q&A videos, but I think it's time we go there again. Because people say, right, how can I become a better wildlife photographer, i.e., in your words, a better storyteller? So, yes, you can go and get your $75,000 student loan and study all these things. It's not going to make you a better storyteller. It's not. Here's what it's going to do. It's going to give you a better understanding, maybe, of, especially if you go deep on those kind of things, it's going to give you a better understanding of the subjects that you're filming and so on and so forth. Still, I've had teachers at school and at university that were geniuses. They were genii, lots of them. Geniuses. Sorry, small joke. And they knew shit. They knew everything. And you could see if you're speaking to them, they know what the hell's going on. They couldn't tell a story worth shit. Nothing. So, if you want to get into this thing, and if you want to make a success of it, my suggestion would be, if you have the cash, win the lottery, go do your course, that's fine. But it's not a requirement for you to tell stories about wildlife. It's definitely not. It's not. This thing and you, that is how you're going to tell stories. You can go and self-study everything that you can get in that course. Obviously, it's easier when people give you the syllabus and blah, 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 blah. But if you go and study up on the animals or the work you want to do, you do not have to be in the top 2% to be a good storyteller. No, you could be in the top 10% of knowledge base on your subject. If you, however, are in the top 2% of knowing how to communicate your message and tell your stories, that's when you're going to win. That's when you're going to win. Storytelling and you becoming a good video maker is more a creative process. Yet, whoa, don't email me yet. Yes, you need to know the knowledge. Yes, you need to know the theory. You need to know the subject, the detail, the background. But the variable is going to be in the creative. How are you telling me that story? Let's take it a step further. Aunt Betty is sitting in the US. You're going to do a story on pick something. On eyes, which is a very evil looking lemur that you find in Madagascar. Aunt Betty knows shit about eyes. She thinks that's something you said when she misses the train. You know, that's what Aunt Betty thinks. So you want to tell her a story. You want to make a video and a documentary on the eye. You can go deep. You can meet with experts, chat to the local guides. There's a lot of knowledge there. You can chat to the local guides, find a hell of a lot of information, and then create your story. Okay? When Aunt Betty wants to watch your eye documentary video, she gives two shits about the deeper DNA level of stuff. She couldn't care. She wants to know the basics. Storytelling happens up here, and then you're going to go deeper. If you go too deep with your narrative and your storytelling as a video maker or as a wildlife photographer, you're going to alienate people, and you're going to attract a very educated bunch who are then going to start saying to you, yes, John, sorry, what was it? Yes, Sharon, your knowledge is wrong. So, who are you going to make documentaries for? Who are you going to create content for? Speak to them. Keep it basic. Yes, go a little bit deeper, and the history, the background, what it is, what it's doing, why is it doing it. You can go into genetics, lineages, where do they come from, why are they nocturnal, why are their fingers so long. That's the stuff that your audience wants to hear. Do you need to drop $75,000 on a student loan to make that happen? Probably not. Probably not. Is your documentary going to be more impressive to Aunt Betty who gives two shits about the deep stuff? Not at all. So I think you need to reverse engineer this, Sharon. You need to go and set yourself right. I want to become, what do you say here? I want to become a wildlife filmmaker. That's cool. If you're just a cameraman person, like you say here, camera person, someone's going to say to you what to shoot. That's easy. You understanding the animal's behavior, and I believe this comes more from a practical experience point of view than a theoretical experience point of view. I've seen people they've basically read and memorized the entire Safari Companion book on animal behavior, and they'll say to you, oh no, if a lion does this, but they can't see it. They've read it, the practical experience counts. So if you have the practical experience, you can film it. If you are going to be the person who puts together the ideas around the concept, I think that is where Aunt Betty wants to see it. She wants to see the storytelling. She doesn't care about your knowledge. You need to have the knowledge that should people ask you questions. But yeah, I don't think it's worth it. Hey, let me put this to you this way. If I could go back, hang on. Excuse me, still fighting a bit of a throat from all the travel. If I could go back, starting my guiding career about 15 years ago, if I had this thing and the capabilities that this thing gives me back then, holy hell, I don't know where I would be. It's still shocking to me that there are so few guides out there in South Africa and camera people and video people who are not doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on what this thing can do for you. You're missing out, man. There's one or two guides out there who are doing it properly, and they're sharing their story of what they're seeing and what they're doing. One of them's joining us in Feb, by the way. I'm going to do a podcast with the new Wild Eye guide starting in Feb soon. Different story. But on those stories, people aren't telling you, okay, this is a leopard, the scientific is Panthera pardus, the reason for this is this, and this is the DNA structures of the leopards here versus Sri Lanka. No. Keep it basic. Get people in first. Build yourself a base of content around your type of content you want to make, and then you can go deeper. I think, yes, I'm not dissing education. It's very important. Well, there's a discussion. But I do think that people lack the practicality of getting shit done and putting content out there without overthinking it. Yeah. Anyway, so for me, Sharon, I would just get stuck in and start. Really. Make your documentaries, get in there, get busy, and get the work done. And then see how it goes from there. I don't know how old you are. You don't tell me in here. I'm a professional filmmaker by trade, film degree, blah, 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 science degrees, majority of people be using natural. I would just start. Just start. If you have any more questions, send me another email, Sharon. We can go deeper and maybe we can do a Skype just with some ideas. But I would just start. Just start. Easiest thing. Right, guys, there we go. Episode 170 of the podcast, Q&A, also episode 51. As I'm sitting here and I'm going to have to edit this now, I'm not sure how I'm going to label this on YouTube, but probably just 170 and pick it up from there. Easiest thing. So, yeah, that's me for now. If you have any other questions, my email, gerry@wildeye.co.za, is wild with a hyphen eye.co.za. You can also find me on all major social media platforms, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, the whole bunch. Send me your questions. I would love to include them. Like I said, I pretty much have 180 sorted. There's about 8 questions for 180 already. Depending on what you have, I might drop one or add it in, but I will eventually get to every single question. So send them in. Guys, as always, if you're on the podcast listening, thank you so much. I love it. On every single one of these questions, people told me where they're listening. P.S. I usually listen to the podcast on the way to the work. Hi, I listen to the podcast while I'm, where was this one? Walking the dog. So I love hearing where you're consuming the content. So where were you when you watched this video? Send me a mail. Let me know. Where are you when you listen to the podcast? Send me a message. Let me know. Thank you for your time, guys. I truly appreciate you following the journey. Hope it's giving some value to you. And yeah, keep the questions coming. I will see you in the next episode. My name is Gerry. I'm from Wild Eye. Have a good one.